Hello there, my name is Laurier and welcome to the Old Dirty History channel. Today I'm going to be discussing a pretty heavy topic, and it is about the Goebbels Children. And this is a World War II based story. Although this story does take place during World War II, I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time talking about the intricacies of the war because it's not a World War II story per se. I don't want it to be a World War II video, but I will give you enough supplementary information to get an understanding of what this topic is and the story itself. Also, a lot of the names that I'm going to be pronouncing are German, and I am not great at pronouncing German names, so I just want to apologize in advance for any names of places or people that I completely botch. I promise you, I am seriously trying my best. And I want to go straight into the video, but before I do, I also want to give a little disclaimer because, like I said, this is a very heavy topic. For those of you who aren't familiar with the Goebbels children, they were the 6 children of Magda and Joseph Goebbels, and they were pretty much Adolf Hitler's right hands. Joseph Goebbels was his minister of propaganda, and he was within Hitler's inner ring. And their children, towards the end of the war, met a very unfortunate fate that is just completely despicable. And I felt the need to make this video because I feel like this story is very important. As horrible as it is, it shouldn't be forgotten. So it's interesting, but at the same time it's terrible, and we're going to talk about it. Some of the topics in this video will center around hate speech, genocide, as well as filicide, which is the murder of children. So if this is not something that you want to hear, if this topic is a little too heavy for you, and if so, I completely understand, now is the time to click off of this video and join up with us in the next video. Or you could check out one of my other really awesome videos. But if you want to continue watching and traverse this really horrible story with me in history, then let's get started. Magda Goebbels, also known as the First Lady of Germany, was born in Berlin, Germany in 1901. This is her full name. I'm just going to throw it up on the screen because I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that, but that is her full name. It is a combination of her maiden name and her previous married name and her stepdaddy. It's a huge combination. She just decided to retain all these various names throughout the duration of her life. That's her name. We're going to call her Magda going forward. At a young age, she was married to a wealthy German man named Gunther Quandt, and he was one of the founders of BMW. This guy had some money. They met in 1920 on a train, and she didn't marry Quandt for love, but more so for his cash. And this actually worked out just fine because Quandt wasn't really the loving type of man. He didn't really like to show a lot of public display of affection, not very loving. So it worked out for them for a time. Both of their families did not support their union because there was a huge age gap between the two. When they married, Quandt was in his 30s and Magda was like 18 years old. In addition to that, Quandt was also fresh out of a divorce. He had married a previous woman, and from that marriage they had 2 children that he brought into this relationship with Magda. But eventually they would have their own child within the first year of their marriage, and they named him Harold Quandt. Their marriage ended when Magda decided she wanted to have herself a little side piece, and her side piece happened to be an old boyfriend. When Quandt found out, he was furious, and he was like, you know what, I'm going to retain custody of our son, and I'm not giving you a dime. You're not getting alimony, you're not getting anything. Magda, she had other plans. She was able to blackmail him, and with the information she had, she was able to retain custody, full custody of their son, and she was able to become a pretty wealthy woman. And with this money that she got from the divorce, she was able to live a pretty nice life just full of luxury and traveling and shopping. There was no limitations to what she wanted. She was an independent woman. And for this time in history, which was in the 1920s, is a big deal for a woman. It was really rare that a single woman, especially a single woman with a child, would have so much money and wealth and resources at her disposal. But the life that financial freedom gave Magda eventually made her bored. Yeah, she wanted more. Apparently traveling the world and learning various different languages and pretty much being able to do what the hell you want gets boring after a while. So Magda wanted to pursue some excitement in her life. She wanted to mix it up, shake it up a little bit. Instead of, I don't know, opening a business, going to school, picking up a hobby. What does Magda decide to do? Well, she decides to attend a Nazi Party meeting in 1930. And at this meeting, she witnessed this short man with a big head named Joseph Goebbels give a moving and mesmerizing speech. And she was immediately sold by the Nazi Party's agenda, so much so that she ended up joining that same year. So who is this Joseph Goebbels? Well, Joseph Goebbels was born in Reich, Germany in 1897 to Roman Catholic parents who lived a simple life. He was one of 5 children and he had a pretty rough childhood due to a lot of illnesses. At one point he had polio and the disease left him with a foot deformity that caused one of his legs to be shorter than the other for the rest of his life. And due to his disability, when World War I rolled around, he was denied being able to serve in the military. Side note, because I thought this was interesting, and I'm sorry, but I thought it was also pretty funny. But during my research, I came across a web page of PBS's called The American Experience, and it describes him as being a small man with a big head and a mesmerizing voice. That's right, he was a small man with a big head and a mesmerizing voice. Very mesmerizing. Joseph admired and adored Hitler as a leader and as his friend. I'd say it was safe to say he looked at him as this messiah-like figure. And due to his devotion to Hitler and the Nazi Party, he quickly grew up the ranks and eventually became the Nazi Party's propaganda minister. And this role made him one of the most powerful players in the Nazi Party. In this role, Joseph was responsible for the party's propaganda machine. So any way that he could get their message out, their agenda, Goebbels was the one that was the driving force behind it. Any posters, propaganda videos, radio broadcastings, you name it. This was all under the leadership of Joseph Goebbels. And when you do research on Hitler and Goebbels as well, you see a lot of people say that Hitler was very good at giving speeches. He was very intense and he would just hypnotize the crowd. Well, Goebbels apparently, supposedly had that same quality. If you're not familiar with what the Nazi Party was and you've been living under a rock, let me give you a quick little overview. The Nazi Party was a political party led by Adolf Hitler that operated as a mass movement known as National Socialism. And they came into power in Germany in 1933. The Nazi Party's ideologies were based on the vision of exterminating all those they deemed enemies of the Aryan race. So in summary, they were white supremacists. Anyone who did not fit their notion of racial superiority were subject to extermination, and the Jewish populace were specifically targeted. They created anti-Semitic policies that ultimately led to the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews were murdered and more than 1 million of their victims were children. When Joseph first saw Magda, he was attracted to her right away. He had heard about this upper-class, overly dressed woman who desperately wanted to help the party, but he wasn't so sure about her just yet. He was very suspicious and suspected that she wasn't serious, and so he didn't take her seriously at first. So to start out, he gave her a job as his assistant, and she pretty much was a paper pusher, if you will. And during this employee-employer relationship, it eventually blossomed into a love affair. In addition to having a big head and a mesmerizing voice, Joseph was also a big womanizer. He had multiple affairs prior to marrying Magda and during their entire marriage. One of his lovers included a woman named Elsa Anka. I know I mispronounced that, but I'm gonna keep it moving, who happened to be half Jewish. Funny how that works. When Magda and Joseph started their affair, he was actually already having an affair with his secretary and his best friend's fiance. What a guy. What a friend. So after Magda worked for the party and was sleeping with Joseph and working long, late hours, she finally proved herself to Joseph that she was the one, that she actually cared about their agenda. The other thing that made Joseph decide that he was interested in her and would eventually marry her was the fact that Hitler actually really liked Magda. In fact, Hitler said that it was a shame that he couldn't marry anyone because she would have been the perfect wife. And that's not because Hitler was already married. In fact, he was actually having an affair with a woman named Eva Braun behind closed doors. He didn't marry because in his mind, he believed, to be an efficient leader, that he had to show his people, he had to show Germany that they were his one and only love. And so he thought that having a wife would show him as being weak in some way, and that Germany was not his top priority. And so he was never seen romantically involved with women. But he liked Magda and he thought that she was awesome. She was the perfect anti-Semitic wife, apparently. So Joseph was sold on this. He was like, this is the perfect woman for me. Time to settle down. Not really. I'm going to still screw around, but I'm going to marry her. So Joseph and Magda got married on December 19th, 1931. The Goebbels became one of the most powerful and wealthy families due to their close proximity to Hitler. Eventually, Joseph and Magda's union resulted in 6 children. There was Helga Suzanne, Hildegard Trodell, Helmut Christian, Holdine Catherine, Hedwig Johanna, and Heidrun Elizabeth. Helga Suzanne was the oldest and was born in 1934, and the youngest was Heidrun Elizabeth, who was born in 1940. Each child was born damn near back to back, and I'm sitting here thinking, how the hell did they have the time? How did they find the time? Committing genocide. How does one find the time to pump out all these children while you're over here killing millions? It boggles the mind. The Goebbels family lived a very, very privileged life. They enjoyed banquets and traveling, and they had several vacation homes. But living in the lap of luxury did not last long for this family. Germany won several victories, but by mid-1942, their luck ran out. And while the Germans had to deal with all this death and destruction around them as things were really getting bad in Germany during World War II, the Goebbels, well, they moved to their country home. They just said, you know what? We want to get away from the hustle and bustle of it all this death and destruction that we've caused. We need a break, a little vacay. Let's go on holiday in the Alps, maybe. Let's do that while everyone else in Germany is dealing with the most unimaginable, horrific acts of violence you could think of. On January 6, 1945, Hitler and some of his staff moved to a bunker called the Führer Bunker, and it was located in Berlin underneath of the Reich Chancellery. And you could access it from the Reich Chancellery garden and go down this long, deep tunnel. Now, this bunker, I'm not going to go deep into its specifics, but I'm going to throw up some imagery here so you can get a rough idea of how big it was and what it looked like. This place was huge. It was big enough to house up to 200 of Hitler's workers. And Hitler actually had his own suite within the bunker. And it was 3 bedrooms, and the whole thing was fireproof. I'm not sure if the rest of the bunker was. I doubt it. You know, knowing Hitler, he was probably like, fuck y'all. I'm gonna live, personally. Don't know about you guys, but me, I'm good. I'm chilling. We're fireproof over here. So after Hitler went into the bunker, the Goebbels family would join him shortly after in April. And this also included the 6 Goebbels children. And this bunker would become the final home of not just Hitler, but the entire Goebbels family. As the Soviet Union's Red Army began enclosing Berlin, the realization set in for everyone in that bunker that the end was near, except for Hitler. Hitler was in denial for quite some time. You know, he was sitting down there giving orders and directing what little he could of the war in this bunker, and he's still holding on to hope, but everybody else knew. They're like, bruh, you're crazy. Like, the end is near. The end is near, sir. And it took him a while, but eventually Hitler finally came to the realization that, yeah, no, I've lost. The war is gone. The Soviets are coming. They're going to kill me. So I need to make preparations. What am I going to do? So once the denial washed away, it was then that Hitler decided he was going to commit suicide. And so did his longtime mistress, Eva Braun, who unnecessarily accompanied him into this bunker. She didn't have to. Matter of fact, the public didn't even really know that she was with this guy the entire time. Only people within Hitler's close circle knew about this. But she decided to accompany him, and they decided together that they were going to die together in that bunker instead of have the Red Army capture them. There was also this fear, especially amongst the women, of being raped. There were stories about Red Army soldiers raping women as they came across them. And so nobody, of course, wants to meet that end. So Eva and Hitler, they committed suicide shortly after deciding to marry each other after years of hiding behind closed doors. Joseph had planned to stay with Hitler up until the very end, with his children by his side. And we know this because Joseph actually left behind a ridiculously large diary. I'm talking about volumes of it. Some of it has survived, some of it not. But what we do know from it is that Joseph actually wrote down that he had planned for his children to die instead of being captured should they fail. So this has already been planned, that he wanted to kill his children instead of having them be captured. It was said that people who fled the bunker and Berlin actually offered Magda and Joseph to take their children out safely with them before it was too late. But they said, no, we want them to stay here with us. And that it's just so upsetting that this was planned and that people even offered and they said no. It makes me sick to my stomach. Magda is even quoted as having said that she did not give birth to her children, quote, so that they might later be paraded around in the Soviet Union or in the US as children of the propagandist Goebbels. The whole situation is disgusting, and yes, while that would have been a rough life, it's better than death, ma'am. It is better than death of a child. While in the bunker, Magda and Joseph executed a plan for how they were going to kill their own children before the Red Army reached the bunker. In their minds, they believed that this was the only way. They did not want them or their children to live in a world without their Führer. I tried. They didn't want to, okay? At this point, Hitler has committed suicide. Everyone in the bunker is preparing for surrender or attempting to flee or death. Magda and Joseph, they start making arrangements for the murder of their own children at this point. Because there weren't many witnesses that survived this event in the bunker, there's a lot of debate as to how the murders actually happened. The information I'm going to share with you is a combination of accounts given by two people. One is from a Nazi dentist named Helmut Kunz, and the other is Hitler's bodyguard, Misch. I tried. Helmut Kunz was transferred to the bunker on April 23, 1945, as the head dentist. He recounts his version of events as follows. Upon arriving at the bunker, Kunz successfully performed a dental procedure on Magda, and then just a few days afterwards, she approached him and asked him for his assistance in killing her own children. Kunz claims that he said no to this request, but then Joseph Goebbels revealed Hitler had already made arrangements for his children. How kind. How kind. He made arrangements for his children to actually be killed by his personal doctor, Ludwig Stumpfberger. But Joseph did not trust Ludwig. He didn't trust that he would be able to complete this horrific task because who the hell would want to do something like that? The fact that these parents were so adamant to have somebody murder their kids is just, It's mind-blowing to me. Like it truly makes me sick to my stomach. And researching this and telling you guys this now, it just doesn't make it easier over time. I'm still not numb to this, and God, I hope I never am, because that means my humanity is completely gone. To avoid these orders that he was given, Kunz at one point fled the bunker, but then he claims he was unfortunately sent back. How that worked, I'm not exactly sure. But then when he arrived, he was approached with this request once again. But he says this time he was able to meet a compromise with Magda and Joseph, as if they are executing some trade agreement. It's crazy. Kunz claims that this compromise consisted of him injecting the children with morphine, pretty much putting them to sleep, and then Magda would feed them poison. That becomes the agreement. Kunz says, okay, I can live with that. I mean, he didn't say that exactly, but he agreed to it. On the evening of May 1st, 1945, Kunz injected the children with morphine. He claims Magda then looked at him tearfully and said, I can't do it. I can't uphold my end of the agreement. Can you please give them the poison? And Kunz said, no, I already told you I'm not doing this. We made a deal, an agreement. I'm not doing this. As if giving them the morphine wasn't pretty much killing them already. So then Kunz asked Hitler's doctor, Stumpfberger, to do it. But Stumpfberger said, absolutely not. I want nothing to do with this. However, when Kunz threatened to go tell Joseph Goebbels that he refused to kill his children, that's when Stumpfberger apparently said, okay, fine, I'll do it. Stumpfberger then went into the children's room with Magda, and then just a few moments later, he exited the rooms with her. Kunz says that Magda's face was completely pale and she didn't say a word. She was completely silent. Not long after, Magda and Joseph committed suicide. So that's one telling of the story. That's one perspective. Now I want to share with you the second retelling of the story, which was given by Misch, who was Hitler's bodyguard. In 2008, Hitler's bodyguard, Misch, published a memoir called The Last Witness, The Memoirs of Hitler's Bodyguard. Misch was one of the people who accompanied Hitler in the bunker from day one. And so he witnessed those final days of pretty much everybody as the Red Army approached the bunker. Up until Misch's death, he maintained support for Hitler. He likes to describe him as this like misunderstood guy who meant well. The whole thing is just disgusting. When Misch was operating the switchboard in the bunker, he watched Magda dress all of the children in the same long white gown, and then he watched her comb all of their hair. At that time, their child Helga was crying. He says he knew what he was witnessing was a mother parting from her children, but he didn't want to be a witness to it. So he just acted like it wasn't happening, turned his head around, and continued to play around with his switchboard as he's hearing this child cry and their mother prepare them for death. Misch also said that it appeared that their oldest daughter, Helga, could tell that something was wrong, that she could tell that the adults were lying, and she was completely distraught and terrified. The other thing he said was that Helga was not very fond of Magda, her mother, from what he could tell. And during that horrible night, he witnessed Magda pushing Helga towards the stairs that led up to her and her siblings' deaths. At 7 p.m., Magda returned from that room without her children, completely pale and silent. Misch witnessed her trembling as she sat down at the table. And then, he says, she proceeded to play a card game, smoke a cigarette, and have a drink. While she was playing cards, her husband, Joseph, walked into the room. He didn't say anything to her. He didn't even acknowledge her. Eventually, Magda went right upstairs without her husband, and Misch never saw her again. Later that night, Joseph Goebbels looked at the bodyguard and told him, "The war is lost. We knew how to live, and now we know how to die. I do not need you any longer, Misch. Clear up here." He then extended his hand to Misch for a handshake and left for his room, where he also committed suicide. This whole story just gives me the chills entirely. It is so chilling. Those who did not kill themselves fled the bunker, and many of them were captured. The Red Army would capture the entire bunker on May 1st, 1945. And Misch also recounts that while he was in captivity when the war was over, someone told him that when the Red Army made it to the bunker, they gathered all of the children's bodies and they laid them out in the street. For some messed up reason, they rounded up some random Berlin citizens and led them past the children's bodies. And then the citizens proceeded to throw stones and spit on the children as they walked by. So now I want to spend this time to just mention each child individually, their names, their ages, the day they were born. I just want to use this time just to briefly focus on them. Helga Suzanne was born on September 1st, 1932. She was said to be a daddy's girl, and she was also the eldest daughter. She was murdered at just 12 years old. Inspection of her body after her death confirmed bruises all over her body and many on her face. It is believed that due to Helga's age, she had a much better suspicion of what was going on compared to her other siblings. And because of this, she may have fought against her killers, and as a result, she acquired the bruising all over her body trying to fight to save her own life. Hildegard Traudel was born on April 13th, 1934. Her nickname was Hildy. Her father referred to her as a little mouse. She was murdered at just 11 years old. Helmut Christian was born on October 2nd, 1935. He was the only boy born to Magda and Joseph. Little Helmut wore braces, and it was said that he was a bit of a dreamer. Joseph Goebbels kept a series of diaries during his time by Hitler's side, and in them, he referred to Helmut as a clown. When the children were in the bunker with Hitler, Helmut actually heard the gunshot of Hitler shooting himself. Helmut was murdered at just 9 years old. Holdine Catherine was born on February 19, 1937. Her nickname was Holdy. It is said she was the forgotten child out of the group for a time, which led to her becoming the favorite. She was murdered at just 8 years old. Hedwig Johanna was born on May 5th, 1938. Her nickname was Hedda. She was murdered at 6 years old, only 4 days before her 7th birthday. Heidrun Elizabeth was born on October 29th in 1940. Her nickname was Heidi. She was born on the same day as her father. At some point in Joseph and Magda's marriage, their union fell apart due to numerous infidelities and jealousy, mostly on Joseph's side. It wasn't until Hitler encouraged them to mend their relationship that they worked things out, and then they had Heidrun. It is because of this, Heidrun was considered to be the reconciliation child. She died at just 4 years old. The only surviving sibling was actually Magda's first child from her first marriage. He was actually a prisoner of war at the time of his siblings' deaths, and he was 23 years old. And this picture was actually manipulated to have Gunther added into this family photo. It's honestly very creepy. It kind of creeps me out. It's disturbing. How true Misch or Kunz's stories are is up for debate. You know, I personally don't really trust people who supported the Nazi party or people who just idly watched as children were murdered. But who knows? You know, it's up to you what you decide to believe from either story. I find it interesting as well that the two people that Kunz pretty much says were responsible for the death of the children are people who are no longer alive to speak for themselves, and that's Magda and Hitler's doctor, Stumpfegger. Stumpfegger died as well. I didn't mention that, but yeah, he died. So I find that very convenient for Kunz, and at the same time, he's acting like he didn't play a role when he administered morphine to them to knock them out. So I'm like, sir, regardless of what you claim, you are still responsible for the deaths of these children. To me, that's my opinion on the matter, and that's on facts. While we don't exactly know for sure what happened that unfortunate, horrible day when Magda ushered her children into that room, one of the stories that's gone around is that when Magda ushered the kids into the room, no matter who was with her, whether she was alone or with the doctor or whoever, that the way she administered the poison to them was through a piece of chocolate. That's something else that I've come across. But who knows for certain how it happened. What we do know is that the children were definitely murdered when the Red Army arrived. In 2005, Misch, Hitler's bodyguard, advocated for plaques to be built to honor the Goebbels children right next to the memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe in Berlin. And the memorial is a sea of concrete slabs to memorialize 3 million Jewish victims of the Holocaust. Misch argued that the children were also victims of the Third Reich, and therefore they also deserved to be memorialized there as well. The issue that a lot of people had with this, specifically the Jewish community, was that one, the potential for this space to become a breeding ground or a gathering ground for neo-Nazis, which is a genuine concern. The other issue that the community had was that this could pretty much trivialize the deaths of all of these Jewish people who were murdered under the Nazi Party's rule. The whole point of the memorial is to honor their memories. And so including the children of the people who dealt their death sentence trivializes their deaths. In response to this concern, this piece of crap, Misch responded by saying that neo-Nazism, it's just a buzzword. You know, he in turn trivializes the idea of neo-Nazism. And he says,
all they are people who are nationally conscious. That's all a Nazi is. They're just nationally conscious. They're not anti-Semitic or racist or any of those other things.
But yeah, that pretty much concludes the story. If you made it to the end of the video, I really do appreciate it. Thank you so much. I know this was a really heavy topic, but you know, I wanted to share it because I felt like stories like this are important to remember, because history isn't always about random, you know, cute little facts or, you know, fun, badass things that happen. Sometimes history is very dark and depressing and horrible. Actually, a good chunk of it is. And so as cliche as it sounds, if we don't remember these events that happened in the past, we're doomed to repeat them. So thank you again for accompanying me today. I would love to know you guys' thoughts, especially about the memorial thing that Misch recommended. It's a very weird, funny situation because these children, they were victims. No one can tell me otherwise. They were definitely victims. But at the same time, they were the children of the people who were responsible for millions of deaths. So what do you guys think? Should they have a plaque to memorialize them, or should they not? Should they have one just in a separate area altogether? I'd love to know your thoughts. And that concludes this video. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, bye.
Perfect.